My name is Ethan Walker, and until 2 weeks before my wedding, I believed I was the luckiest man alive. I was 32 years old, worked as a civil engineer, and had spent the last 5 years building a life with the woman I thought was my forever. Her name was Claire Morgan. She had the kind of smile that could calm a crowded room. She remembered birthdays without reminders, laughed at my terrible jokes, and somehow made ordinary evenings feel like memories worth keeping. When I proposed 6 months earlier on a quiet hill overlooking the city, she had cried before saying yes. I remembered slipping the ring onto her finger with hands that shook more than I wanted to admit. "I thought you'd never ask," she had whispered. I believed every word. Now, as our wedding day drew closer, our apartment looked like a storage room filled with flowers, invitation samples, and unopened gift boxes. Claire stood in the kitchen one Saturday morning arranging seating charts across the table. She looked up and smiled. "Can you believe we're almost married?" I walked over and wrapped my arms around her waist. 5 years suddenly doesn't feel long enough. She laughed softly. "We've survived 5 years. I think we'll survive forever." "I hope so." The words slipped from her mouth naturally. Then, a second later, I heard another voice. "I hope I made the right choice." I froze. The sentence hadn't come from Claire's lips. Her mouth hadn't moved. She continued writing names on the seating chart as though nothing unusual had happened. I blinked several times. Maybe I was tired. I'd been working overtime all week. Lack of sleep could do strange things to the mind. I kissed her forehead. "I'll go make coffee. You're a lifesaver." As I turned toward the coffee machine, the voice came again. Ryan always made better coffee. The mug slipped from my hand. It struck the kitchen floor and shattered into pieces. Claire spun around immediately. "Ethan." She hurried toward me. "Are you okay?" I stared at her. She looked genuinely concerned. There was no sign she had said anything about someone named Ryan. "I'm fine," I managed. My hand just slipped. She squeezed my arm. "You've been working too hard. I'll clean this up." As she knelt to collect the broken pieces, I couldn't stop staring at her. Ryan. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. Ryan Mitchell, her college boyfriend. The man she had dated before we met. She had mentioned him only a handful of times over the years, always casually, always as someone firmly in her past. I had never felt threatened by him. Until now. Claire looked up. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I forced a smile. "Just thinking." She smiled back. "I know that look. You're planning something romantic." I laughed awkwardly. "Maybe." She stood and kissed my cheek. "I have to meet the florist this afternoon. Can you pick up the wedding favors while I'm gone?" "Of course. You're the best." She walked toward the bedroom to grab her purse. Then I heard it again. "I wonder if Ryan still wears that blue jacket." Every muscle in my body tightened. I slowly followed her into the hallway. She was humming happily while checking her phone. Completely normal. Completely unaware that I could somehow hear thoughts she had never spoken aloud. She looked back at me. "What?" "Nothing. You've been acting strange all morning. Just tired." She stepped closer and gently adjusted my collar. "Don't work so hard. We're getting married soon. I need my future husband healthy." She smiled with the same warmth I had fallen in love with years earlier. Then another thought drifted into my mind. He deserves someone who isn't still comparing him to someone else. My heart skipped. She kissed me one last time before leaving the apartment. The door closed softly behind her. I stood motionless in the silent hallway. For several long minutes, I couldn't think. Either I was losing my mind, or the woman I loved had been speaking to me with two completely different voices all along, that I remained standing in the hallway long after Claire left. The apartment had never felt so quiet. For 5 years, I had believed I knew the woman I loved better than anyone else. Now I wasn't even sure I knew what was real. I kept replaying the morning in my mind. Her smile, her gentle voice, her reassuring touch. None of those matched the thoughts I had somehow heard. I hope I made the right choice. Ryan always made better coffee. He deserves someone who isn't still comparing him to someone else. I pressed both hands against the kitchen counter. This isn't possible. There had to be a logical explanation. Stress, exhaustion, a medical problem. I even searched online for symptoms of sleep deprivation, and auditory hallucinations. The results only made me more confused. Nothing explained why the voices matched Claire's expressions perfectly, or why they arrived in the exact moments she seemed lost in thought. By afternoon, I had almost convinced myself the entire experience had been imagined. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Claire. Claire, the florist meeting is taking longer than expected. I'll probably be home around 6. Love you. I smiled sadly. She had always ended every message with those 2 words. Love you. I wanted to believe them. An hour later, I arrived at the shopping center to pick up our wedding favors. The store was only a few blocks from the florist studio. As I walked past a small cafe, I noticed someone familiar through the front window. Claire. She sat alone at a corner table, stirring a cup of coffee while looking absent-mindedly toward the street. I checked my phone again. She had said she was still with the florist. Maybe the meeting had already ended. I told myself not to overthink it. Then, as I stood outside the cafe, the strange voice returned. What if he doesn't come? I froze. Claire looked toward the entrance. Her fingers tapped nervously against the side of her cup. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked anxious. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe it's better if he did. My heart pounded. She wasn't thinking about me. She was waiting for someone. A few seconds later, the cafe door opened. A tall man stepped inside wearing a dark blue jacket. Claire looked up immediately. Her eyes widened for the briefest moment. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. Not even the comfortable smile she gave me. This smile carried years of memories. Years I hadn't been part of. The man sat across from her. I couldn't hear his words through the glass, but I heard Claire's thoughts as clearly as if she were standing beside me. He still wears the blue jacket. He hasn't changed at all. The man was Ryan Mitchell. There was no doubt. I had seen old college photographs years ago. He looked older now, but still recognizable. Every instinct told me to walk inside, to demand an explanation, to ask why she had lied. Instead, I stayed where I was, hidden by the reflection on the cafe window. Ryan smiled as he spoke. Claire laughed softly. Then another thought reached me. Why does being with him still feel so familiar? The words struck harder than any physical blow. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they had only met to talk. Maybe. Then Claire reached into her purse. She removed something small, a folded piece of paper. Ryan unfolded it carefully. I couldn't see what it was, but Claire's thoughts answered the question before my eyes could. I shouldn't have shown him our wedding invitation. The air left my lungs. Our wedding invitation. The one we had spent weeks designing together. The one meant to celebrate the happiest day of our lives. She had brought it to show the man she once loved. Ryan said something that made her lower her eyes. Then I heard the thought that shattered every remaining piece of certainty inside me. Did I make a mistake by saying yes to Ethan? I stepped backward before either of them could notice me. The world around me suddenly felt distant. The traffic, the voices, the afternoon sunlight, everything blurred together. For 5 years, I had believed I was building a future with a woman who had already chosen me. Now I wasn't even sure I was her first choice. As I walked away from the cafe, one final thought echoed through my mind. Not mine, but Claire's. I have to see Ryan one more time before the wedding. In that moment, I realized the impossible gift I'd been given wasn't a blessing. It was revealing a truth that might destroy everything I had ever believed about love. After the afternoon at the cafe, I stopped believing the voices in my head were a coincidence. I didn't know why I could hear Claire's thoughts. I only knew they had never lied to me. The following week became the longest of my life. Our apartment looked exactly as it always had. Wedding invitations covered the dining table. Fresh flowers arrived almost every day. Claire laughed while talking to her bridesmaids, debated cake flavors, and asked my opinion about songs for the reception. From the outside, we looked like the happiest couple preparing for the perfect wedding. Inside, I was falling apart. Every smile she gave me was followed by thoughts she never intended me to hear. One evening she held up 2 neckties. The navy one or the silver one? I smiled faintly. The silver. It matches your dress. She nodded approvingly. Good choice. Then her hidden voice whispered through my mind. Ryan always said silver looked better on me too. My chest tightened. I forced myself to keep smiling. You'll look beautiful. She kissed my cheek. Thank you. The kiss felt warm. The thoughts behind it felt cold. I stopped asking questions. There was no point. She had become an expert at hiding the truth with perfectly chosen words. The only honest conversations she had were the ones inside her own mind. Instead of confronting her, I started paying attention. Whenever she checked her phone, I watched her expression. Whenever she claimed she was meeting vendors, I quietly noted the time. I wasn't trying to spy on the woman I loved. I was trying to understand whether there was anything left worth saving. Every answer pushed me closer to accepting the truth. 3 days before the wedding, my best friend Daniel Brooks invited me out for dinner. He took one look at me and frowned. You look terrible. I've had a busy week. He shook his head. No, you look like someone carrying a secret. Daniel had known me since college. Lying to him was almost impossible. I'm just stressed. He leaned back in his chair. Ethan, I've watched you through failed exams, impossible deadlines, and your father's funeral. I know what stress looks like. This isn't it. I looked down at my untouched meal. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I sighed. What if? I stopped. What if the person you trust most isn't being honest with you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked quietly, do you have a reason to believe that? I do. Can you prove it? Not yet. He folded his hands together. Then don't accuse anyone until you know the whole truth. I wasn't planning to, but don't ignore your instincts either. His words stayed with me long after dinner ended. That night, Claire returned home carrying several shopping bags. I found decorations for the reception. She looked genuinely excited. I think everyone's going to love them. I helped her place the bags on the table. They're beautiful. She smiled brightly. I'm so happy. Then another thought reached me. Only a few more days. The words weren't joyful. They sounded almost like relief. I looked at her carefully. What are you thinking about? She blinked. Our honeymoon. The answer came too quickly. I nodded without arguing. But inside, I already knew she hadn't been thinking about our honeymoon at all. Somewhere behind that smile, another plan was slowly taking shape. And, whatever it was, I was becoming certain it didn't include a future with me. The closer our wedding day came, the more carefully I listened. Not to Claire's words, to the thoughts she couldn't hide. The strange gift had become impossible to ignore. Sometimes her thoughts were ordinary. I need to remember to call the florist. I hope the weather stays nice. Those moments almost convinced me that everything could still be normal. Then Ryan's name would appear again, and every hope I had would disappear with it. 2 evenings before the wedding, Claire sat beside me on the couch while pretending to scroll through wedding photos on her phone. Outwardly, she looked completely relaxed. Inside, her mind told a different story. Ryan said everything is ready. I kept my eyes on the television. I didn't dare look at her. One ceremony, one reception, then I'll finally leave with him. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid she might hear it. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We're almost there. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. Yeah, almost. She smiled. I can't believe how quickly 5 years passed. Neither could I. 5 years of trust. 5 years of memories. 5 years that suddenly felt fragile. The next morning, Claire announced she needed to meet her maid of honor to discuss the final seating arrangements. I shouldn't be long, she said as she grabbed her purse. I nodded. Drive safely. She kissed my cheek. I love you. Then the familiar hidden voice drifted through my mind. I hate lying to him. For the first time, I heard genuine guilt. But it wasn't enough. Guilt didn't erase betrayal. After she left, I drove across town. Not to follow her, to clear my head. I ended up parking near the Riverwalk where Claire and I had once spent countless evenings talking about our future. Instead of finding peace, I found another surprise. Ryan's car was parked nearby. A few minutes later, Claire arrived. She walked quickly toward him. This time I stayed far enough away that neither of them noticed me. I couldn't hear Ryan's voice, but Claire's thoughts reached me clearly. Please tell me this is still the right decision. Ryan said something that made her smile weakly. Then another thought answered the question I hadn't wanted to ask. After the vows, Ethan will be greeting guests. That's when I'll slip away. Every muscle in my body went rigid. She wasn't doubting anymore. She had a plan. She continued listening while Ryan spoke. Her thoughts came one after another. The driver will be waiting behind the east parking lot. The luggage will already be in the car. We'll leave before anyone notices. My hands clenched into fists. They had planned everything, not just leaving, the exact location, the exact timing, even the escape vehicle. Then came the thought that finally destroyed every remaining illusion. Once we're gone, everyone will blame Ethan for the wedding falling apart. I closed my eyes. That hurt more than anything else. She wasn't only leaving me. She was willing to let me become the villain in our story. To our families, our friends, everyone who came to celebrate our marriage. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Don't accuse anyone until you know the whole truth. Now I did. I quietly left before they finished talking. I didn't confront them. I didn't call Claire. I didn't lose control. Instead, I drove home and opened the folder where I had already begun collecting every piece of evidence I could find. The cafe meeting, the lies about her schedule, the wedding invitation she had shown Ryan. Now I added one more page. Escape plan. Time. Immediately after the wedding ceremony. Location. East parking lot behind the reception hall. Driver. Waiting in advance. I stared at the words for several long minutes. Claire believed I would stand at the altar, smiling, completely unaware of what she intended to do. Ryan believed I would be too heartbroken to fight back. They were both wrong. If Claire wanted to turn our wedding into the day she disappeared with another man, then it would become the day everyone learned the truth instead. And this time, I would be ready that I woke before sunrise on the morning of my wedding. For a few quiet seconds, I lay still, staring at the ceiling. Months earlier, I had imagined waking with excitement, counting the hours until I married the woman I loved. Instead, I felt something else, peace. Not because I was happy, because the hardest part was already over. I knew the truth. There were no more questions left to ask, no more lies left to uncover. Claire had already made her choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed in my charcoal gray suit, adjusting my tie in the mirror of the groom's preparation room. A knock came at the door. My father, Michael Walker, stepped inside. He smiled proudly. "You clean up well." I managed a small smile. "I learned from you." He laughed. "I still remember teaching you how to tie a tie before your first school dance. I remember pretending I already knew. You fooled absolutely no one." For a moment, everything felt almost normal. My mother, Linda Walker, entered carrying a small box. "I brought something." She handed it to me. Inside was my grandfather's old pocket watch. "It belonged to your grandfather on his wedding day," she said softly. "He always said time reveals people's true character." I closed the box carefully. "I'll treasure it." She hugged me tightly. "We're so proud of you." The words nearly broke me. Not because of what they meant, because they still believed today would end with a celebration. I hugged her back. "I love you. We love you too." After they left, Daniel Brooks entered without knocking. He studied my face for several seconds. "You've decided." I nodded once. "I have." He didn't ask any questions. He already understood. Whatever happened today, it wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the result of truths I could no longer ignore. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever you do, don't lose yourself." "I won't." A few minutes later, music echoed through the reception hall. Guests began taking their seats. Family members laughed together. Children ran between rows of decorated chairs. Flowers lined the aisle exactly as Claire had planned. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of a perfect wedding. I took my place at the altar. Then I saw Claire. She entered through the grand doors wearing a beautiful white gown. The room fell silent. She smiled as she walked toward me. Every guest admired her. My parents smiled proudly. Her parents, Robert and Helen Morgan, looked emotional as they escorted their daughter forward. She reached my side. "You look handsome. So do you." The officiant welcomed everyone before beginning the ceremony. His words blended into the background. I wasn't listening. I was listening to Claire. Not her voice. Her thoughts. She looked into my eyes while pretending to focus on the ceremony. Then the familiar whisper reached me. "Just make it through the vows." I kept my expression calm. The officiant continued speaking about love, trust, and lifelong commitment. Claire gently squeezed my hand. The guests smiled. Another thought followed. Ryan will be waiting exactly where we planned. My heartbeat remained steady. No one watching could have guessed what I had just heard. The ceremony moved closer to the vows. Claire looked at me with tears in her eyes. To everyone else, they looked like tears of happiness. Only I knew the truth hiding behind them. "I'm sorry, Ethan, but I can't spend my life wondering what might have been." Those words hurt, not because they surprised me, because a part of me had once believed our love was strong enough to survive anything. I realized then that she wasn't standing beside me because she wanted to marry me. She was standing there because she believed marriage would help her hide her escape. The officiant smiled warmly. "We will now exchange our vows." The room grew perfectly still. Everyone waited for the happiest moment of our lives. Instead, I took one slow step backward. The movement was so small that at first, no one seemed to notice. Claire looked at me in confusion. The officiant paused, assuming I had simply misplaced my footing. "Ethan," he asked gently, "is everything all right?" I looked around the room. My parents sat in the front row, smiling with quiet pride. Claire's parents looked equally happy, completely unaware of the truth. Friends and relatives watched us with excitement, cameras ready to capture the vows. None of them deserved to become part of a public spectacle. I took a slow breath. "I'm sorry, but I can't continue this ceremony." The room fell silent. Claire stared at me. "What are you talking about?" I met her eyes. "I know." For the first time that morning, her confident smile disappeared. "I don't understand." I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a small folder. I didn't want to believe it either. I kept hoping there was another explanation. There wasn't. I looked toward both families before continuing. "I won't share private conversations or embarrass anyone unnecessarily. This day has already caused enough pain. But I have learned that Claire has been secretly meeting another man while planning this wedding." Soft gasps spread through the guests. Claire immediately shook her head. "Ethan, that's not." I raised a hand, not to silence her, but to ask for a moment. I gave myself every opportunity to be wrong. I waited. I watched. And I confirmed the truth before standing here today. I opened the folder. Inside were printed photographs showing Claire meeting Ryan at the cafe and the Riverwalk on different days. There were also copies of messages confirming meetings she had hidden behind false excuses. I handed the folder first to my father, then to Robert Morgan. Neither man spoke as they quietly looked through the pages. Claire's face turned pale. Her mother looked at her with disbelief. "Claire, is this true?" Tears filled Claire's eyes. She couldn't finish the sentence. At that exact moment, the large doors at the back of the venue slowly opened. A man stepped inside. Ryan Mitchell. He looked around the hall, clearly expecting Claire to run toward him after the ceremony. Instead, dozens of guests turned to stare at him. His confident expression disappeared. He hadn't expected this. He certainly hadn't expected to arrive before a room full of witnesses who now understood why he was there. Daniel quietly stepped beside me. Without raising his voice, he said to Ryan, "I think you've come at the wrong time." Ryan looked at Claire. She looked back at him with panic written across her face. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The silence was louder than any argument could have been. I slowly removed my wedding ring. For a moment, I held it in my hand, remembering the day I had slipped it on Claire's finger after proposing. That memory now belonged to another life. I placed the ring gently on the altar. Then I looked at Claire one final time. "I loved you with everything I had. I would have spent the rest of my life proving it." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry. I know. And I truly hope you find the future you're searching for." I paused. "But it won't be with me." There was no anger in my voice. No shouting. No revenge. Just acceptance. I turned toward our families. "I'm sorry that your joy today has become heartbreak. You deserved a celebration. Instead, you received the truth." My father stood and walked toward me. Without saying a word, He placed a hand on my shoulder. A moment later, my mother joined him. Claire's father slowly lowered his head. Her mother quietly embraced her daughter as Claire began to cry. No one celebrated. No one applauded. Some truths are too painful for that. I walked down the aisle alone. The same aisle I had expected to walk with my wife only minutes later. Behind me, I heard Claire sob quietly. I didn't look back. Outside the venue, the afternoon sun felt strangely warm. Daniel caught up with me near the entrance. "You okay?" I looked at the wedding hall one last time. "I will be." For weeks, I had feared becoming the abandoned groom left standing at the altar. Instead, I had made a different choice. I walked away before someone else could abandon me. For the first time in my life, I chose my own dignity over the desperate hope that love could survive without trust. And although my heart was broken, my self-respect remained completely intact. The first few weeks after the wedding were the hardest. Every morning, I reached for my phone before remembering there was no reason to check for Claire's messages anymore. The apartment felt too quiet. Half of the closet stood empty after she collected her belongings. The wedding photographs we had planned to take never existed, but reminders of the life we had imagined were everywhere. For a while, I questioned everything, not whether I had made the right decision. I knew I had. I questioned how I had ignored the warning signs for so long. Daniel Brooks refused to let me disappear into that kind of thinking. Every weekend, he showed up at my apartment carrying breakfast or insisting we go for a run. One Saturday morning, he tossed me a bottle of water. "You've been staring out that window for 10 minutes. I was thinking, that's exactly the problem. I smiled faintly. "So, what's your solution?" "Stop thinking. Start living." He was right. Healing wasn't something that happened while sitting alone with old memories. It happened one decision at a time. A month later, I returned to work full-time. At first, I worried everyone would look at me with sympathy. Instead, most people simply welcomed me back. They asked about new projects instead of old heartbreaks. That normality helped more than they probably realized. A few days after my return, my mentor, Victor Hayes, invited me into his office. Victor had spent nearly 30 years building one of the most successful engineering consulting firms in the region. He had guided my career since I joined the company. He looked up from a stack of reports. "You look better." "I'm getting there. I expected you would." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "I have something for you." I opened it slowly. Inside were plans for a large commercial redevelopment project, the kind of project senior managers usually competed to lead. I looked at him in surprise. "You want me to manage this?" "I do. There are people with more experience. There always will be." He smiled. "But experience doesn't replace character." I remained silent. Victor leaned back in his chair. "You've been through something difficult. You could have allowed it to define your future. You didn't. You chose honesty over convenience. That's the kind of person I trust with important work." His confidence in me meant more than he probably knew. "I won't let you down." "I know." As I left his office, someone nearly walked into me in the hallway. "Oh." A young woman quickly steadied the stack of design folders she was carrying. "I'm so sorry." "It's my fault," I replied. She laughed. I think we were both distracted. She introduced herself with a warm smile. "I'm Sophia Bennett, project planning. Ethan Walker." "I know." She smiled playfully. "Victor has been talking about your new assignment all week." I laughed. "I hope that's a good sign." "It definitely is." Over the following days, Sophia and I worked together almost constantly. She had a practical way of solving problems that balanced my tendency to overanalyze every detail. More importantly, she treated me like everyone else. She never mentioned the wedding. She never looked at me with pity. One afternoon, as we reviewed blueprints in a conference room, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When was the last time you smiled without forcing it?" The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment. "I honestly don't know." She smiled gently. "Then let's make sure work gives you a reason to start again." The redevelopment project became exactly what I needed. Every morning gave me a reason to get out of bed. Every completed milestone reminded me that life had not ended on the day I walked away from the altar. It had simply taken a different direction. Working with Sophia made the long hours easier. She challenged my ideas when they needed improving, celebrated every success with the team instead of taking credit for herself, and somehow knew exactly when to lighten the mood with a joke. One evening, after everyone else had left the office, she closed her laptop and stretched. "I think we've officially looked at enough blueprints for one day." I laughed. I was starting to see floor plans every time I blinked. She smiled. "That's usually a sign it's time to go home." For the first time in months, I realized I was laughing without forcing it. She had been right. Life was slowly finding its way back to me. As the weeks turned into months, something else changed. The strange ability that had once filled my mind with other people's hidden thoughts became quieter. At first, I noticed it only occasionally. I would pass someone in the hallway and hear nothing. No hidden voice. No secret fears. No silent regrets. Eventually, I understood why. I had stopped searching for answers inside other people's minds. Instead, I trusted what I could see through their actions. The gift that had once revealed painful truths no longer felt necessary. And somehow, it quietly faded into silence. One afternoon, Daniel met me for coffee after work. He studied me for a moment before smiling. "You look different. In a good way?" "The best way. You're not carrying the past around anymore." I looked out the cafe window. I finally realized something. "What's that?" I spent too much time wondering why Claire made her choices. But those choices were never mine to control. Daniel nodded. "And now?" "Now I'm building a life that doesn't depend on someone else's decisions." He raised his coffee cup. "That's the Ethan I remember." Not everyone was moving forward as easily. Through mutual friends, I occasionally heard updates about Claire. She and Ryan had started living together shortly after the wedding. The excitement that had brought them back together disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. Ryan wasn't interested in stability. He changed jobs constantly, spent money carelessly, and avoided responsibility whenever life became difficult. The future Claire had imagined never appeared. Instead, arguments became frequent. Financial problems followed. One friend quietly told me Ryan had left for several days after a disagreement, only to return expecting everything to be forgiven. Another mentioned that many of Claire's closest friends had grown distant after learning the truth about the canceled wedding. Even some members of her own family struggled to understand the choices she had made. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing any of it, only sadness. There was a time when I would have done anything to protect her from heartbreak. Now those consequences belonged to the life she had chosen. Late one Friday afternoon, I was reviewing project reports when my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered, "Hello." A few seconds of silence followed. Then I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. "Ethan." It was Claire. She sounded nothing like the confident bride who had stood beside me at the altar months earlier. She sounded tired. "I know I probably don't deserve your time," she said quietly. "But could we meet? Just once. I need to tell you something." I closed my eyes for a moment. The strange gift that had once revealed every hidden thought remained completely silent. For the first time since all of this began, I couldn't hear what was in her mind, only the words she had chosen to speak. Maybe that was how it was always meant to be. The future wasn't built by listening to hidden thoughts. It was built by deciding which voices deserved a place in your life. I took a slow breath before answering. "Tell me when and where." Whatever waited at that meeting, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time, I wasn't going there to win Claire back. I was going to close the final chapter of a story that had already ended. I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes early. It wasn't the same one where I had watched Claire meet Ryan before our wedding. This place was smaller, quieter, and tucked away on a side street where few people would recognize us. I chose a table near the window and waited. Months earlier, I would have spent those minutes rehearsing everything I wanted to say. Now my mind was calm, not because the past no longer mattered, because I had already accepted that it couldn't be changed. A few minutes later, Claire walked through the door. For a second, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner than I remembered. The confidence she had carried on our wedding day had been replaced by quiet exhaustion. When she saw me, she offered a hesitant smile. "Thank you for coming." I stood politely. "Of course." She sat across from me, folding her hands together as if trying to stop them from shaking. The waitress brought 2 cups of coffee. Neither of us touched them. For a long moment, silence filled the space between us. Claire finally spoke. I've replayed that day in my mind 1,000 times. I nodded but said nothing. I kept telling myself I would explain everything if we ever met again. She lowered her eyes. Now, I don't even know where to begin. Start with the truth. Her lips trembled. The truth is, I hurt the person who loved me most. No excuses. No blaming anyone else. Just a simple admission. I appreciated that. I convinced myself I needed closure with Ryan. She swallowed hard. But somewhere along the way, I confused old memories with real happiness. She looked up at me. I thought choosing him would answer all the questions I'd been carrying for years. Instead, she gave a bitter smile. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I listened quietly. Months ago, hearing those words would have changed everything. Now they simply felt like part of the past. Claire continued. Ryan wasn't the man I remembered. He loved the excitement of winning me back. But once he did, her voice faded. He stopped trying. I remembered what mutual friends had told me. The unstable jobs, the arguments, the endless disappointments. Claire took a slow breath. He left 3 months ago. He said he never wanted the kind of life I kept asking for. A sad smile crossed her face. The future I imagined with him only existed in my memories. She looked directly into my eyes. I understand that now. At that moment, the strange ability returned. For the first time in months, I heard the quiet voice inside her mind. I would give anything to undo that day. I closed my eyes for a second. The voice sounded different. There was no uncertainty, no comparisons, no thoughts of Ryan, only regret. Claire continued speaking. I've apologized to my parents. I've apologized to friends. But the apology that matters most, she looked at me with tears filling her eyes, is the one I owe you. Another thought drifted gently into my mind. He deserved the love I promised him. I was too blind to see it. Those words carried none of the selfishness I had once heard. They were honest, painfully honest. For a brief moment, I wish she had felt that certainty before our wedding instead of after it. Life would have been very different. Claire wiped away a tear. I know saying sorry doesn't erase anything. It doesn't. She nodded slowly. I know. The cafe fell quiet again. Outside, people hurried along the sidewalk, completely unaware that two people were sitting across from each other, saying goodbye to a future that had died long before the wedding day ever arrived. Claire took a slow, unsteady breath before speaking again. I know I don't deserve to ask this. She looked down at her hands. But I have to. When she finally met my eyes, tears were already rolling down her cheeks. Would you ever consider giving us another chance? The question hung quietly between us. Months ago, I would have answered before she finished asking. I would have fought for us. I would have searched for reasons to believe love could overcome anything. That man no longer existed. I looked at Claire with kindness instead of anger. I'm grateful you finally found the truth. She nodded silently. But the truth arrived too late. Another thought reached me. Please don't say no. There was no manipulation, no hidden plan, only heartbreak. I felt sorry for her, but feeling sorry wasn't the same as wanting our life back. You once asked me to trust you while you were doubting us. I said quietly, I would spend every future disagreement wondering if you were thinking about leaving again. She closed her eyes. I know, and that isn't a marriage. It's fear. She wiped away another tear. I understand. I smiled sadly. You taught me something I never expected to learn. She looked up. What? My own worth. If someone has to compare me to another person before choosing me, they've already made their decision. A tear slipped down her cheek. I was a fool. No. You were human. You made a choice. And every choice has consequences. I reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand for just a moment. There was a time when I thought losing you would destroy my life. I smiled softly. It didn't. It forced me to build a better one. She let out a shaky laugh through her tears. You always deserved better than what I gave you. I stood from my chair. I hope you find peace, Claire. I truly mean that. And I hope one day you forgive yourself. She looked at me with quiet gratitude. Thank you for treating me with more kindness than I deserved. I nodded once before turning toward the door. As I stepped outside, I waited for the familiar whisper of someone else's hidden thoughts. Nothing came. The strange gift was gone. Completely. I smiled to myself. Maybe it had never been meant to stay forever. It had appeared when I needed to see the truth. Now that I had accepted it, there was nothing left for it to reveal. Several months later, I stood beneath a bright summer sky, adjusting the collar of my suit once again. This time, I wasn't the groom. I was the best man. Daniel Brooks stood at the front of the garden venue, grinning nervously as guests took their seats. Beside him was Sophia Bennett, the woman who had quietly helped him through difficult years, laughed beside him during ordinary days, and loved him without making him compete with anyone from her past. As Sophia walked down the aisle, Daniel looked at her the way every person deserves to be loved. Without hesitation, without comparison, without doubt. I smiled. That was what real love looked like. After the ceremony, Daniel walked over and handed me a glass of sparkling cider. "You've been smiling all day." "I have. What are you thinking about?" I looked at the happy couple surrounded by family and friends. "I'm thinking that love shouldn't feel like a competition." He nodded. "It never should." As the evening sun settled over the celebration, I realized something that brought me more peace than I had ever expected. I hadn't lost the right woman. I had simply lost someone who was never truly ready to choose me completely. The right person would never stand at an altar while dreaming of someone else. The right person would never ask me to compete with memories. The right person would walk toward me with certainty, not hesitation. I left the wedding reception with a light heart and a clear mind. The voices were gone. The doubts were gone. Only hope remained. Some people enter your life to stay forever. Others arrive to teach you what you should never settle for again. Claire had given me one final lesson. Love without trust is only the appearance of love. Real love is different. Real love chooses you completely, every single day. And as I walked confidently toward the future waiting for me, I finally understood that I hadn't been abandoned. I had simply been redirected toward a life where I would never again have to wonder whether I was someone's first choice.